by the time the shock of the flying creature's screech wore off, it was too late. Their swooping attacks were so rapid, I barely had a chance to look at them properly, and my sword arm froze. When the lumbering zombie foot soldiers also closed the gap, I fled in panic. Abranis had been so excited with the relics from the cove, and talking at me about them, he'd stayed up well past his usual early bedtime. But when I awoke him from his well-loved sleep, his excitement, and in turn his patience, had worn off. Abranis looked out at the circling monsters, and at the damaged golem moving towards the zombies, then at me. Fired up by his drowsiness, and my decision to flee the fight, he ordered me to leave his hut and deal with the monsters I'd lured to the village. Even with Two-Bone at my side, my remaining confidence was shattered when I saw the creatures multiply above my head. They must not have seen me when I left the hut, as they didn't attack me until after the sounds of Enin's hissing had died into the distance. It was only when the fourth monster swooped down on me that I managed to land a hit. Their assault was unrelenting, but as they fervently dive-bombed me, a few became stuck under the overhanging roofs. I backed myself into the doorway of the smithy and swiped at the bloodthirsty monsters with the golem, whose precision was admirable for such a hulking creature. My precision, on the other hand, failed me, when I over-enthusiastically swung my sword at one of the trapped beasts, only to find it instead connecting with my iron ally. The sensation of falling into my tethered bed at the gravelly cliffs stunned me, and it took me a moment to recall the slightly less pleasant sensation of the golem's heavy arm slamming me in the jaw. When I climbed down Horsepaw Prominent, I gave the now placid golem a cautious look, before being greeted by a very disappointed Abranis, who shut the door in my face as I gathered my things, including the residual magic that seemed to be invisible to the grumpy smith. Before I could begin to search for the words to explain my reappearance, he openly judged me for being so terrified I had dropped everything and ran, even my donned armour, presumably so I could run away quicker. He didn't know what had really happened to me. Glancing at his forge, he became heated again and scolded me for risking my equipment being flung into the lava. I checked I still had everything, which luckily, I think I did. Despite his harsh demeanour, I got the impression that Abranis was still soft on me, as he explained how to properly fix Borg, the golem. Don't be stingy with the iron. After running off and leaving him to defend the village by himself, it was the least I could do. I shared a knowing glance with Borg as Nelly and I utilised Abranis' techniques, but perhaps he didn't understand. For now, I had given up trying to figure out whether the golem appreciated it, held a grudge, or just didn't care about me at all. As he walked away, I noticed he had left behind a strange orb and some dirt that somehow still retained its grass. I was clueless as to what the orb was, but sensed it was magic and valuable, so I pocketed it whilst I thought no one was looking. Once Borg was looking healthier, Abranis was happy to continue, and he instructed me to build him an anvil from iron. "You may not be much of a warrior, but you certainly are a builder," he said. I retreated into the smithy and went through Nelly's pages forwards and backwards to see if she had the recipe for an anvil, but she didn't. I really didn't want to disappoint Abranis again. When I pressed Nelly for help, she played coy, suggesting that she could help, but wouldn't. She was still sulking, and it was only after I promised her whatever she wanted that she highlighted the recipe for a block of pure iron. Sure enough, as soon as I had the iron block in my hand, she produced the desired blueprint. I didn't know what she could possibly want with the blank check I'd offered her, but it didn't bother me one bit, because Nelly had stopped sulking. I was proud to tell Abranis that the anvil was complete, but the tone changed when he confessed to me that, whilst I had run off, he had inspected my golden armour and appeared to desperately want it. He then went on to explain how the technique he could teach me to fix the magical equipment was rare ancestral knowledge and that he was apprehensive to share. Abranus lacked guile, and his clumsy offer to swap his smithing lesson for my golden armour gave me an opportunity to sweeten the deal, considering how he had already promised to help fix the magic fishing rod. That was how I ended up with the Grumpy Village's diamonds. The next day, I was awake at the crack of dawn, eagerly awaiting for Abranus to come and teach me how to use the anvil. When he did not appear, I went for a wander and found myself on the upper level of the village, where I saw that the door to one of the huts had been broken through. I asked Clara, who was the armoursmith and cousin to the triplet brothers, what had happened, and I was surprised to hear that it was her who had broken the door. She was looking for something in Fergus's room. I was taken aback by her candidness, and she took my shocked silence as agreement when she asked me to fix the door, and not to tell anyone about it. I didn't have time to properly process what had just happened, as I found Fergus had returned and was enjoying a well-deserved bathe in one of the pools. He was friendly in his greeting and wanted to chat about what sort of adventures I'd gotten up to since I'd seen him last. I couldn't face talking to him about anything whilst hiding a secret, but was reluctant to tell him about Clara's antics, as it wasn't my place to interfere in their family matters, so instead insisted that I had to get back to Abranus. I retreated to the smithy, where a now very happy Abranus was eager to impart his knowledge. As he had instructed, I used my old rod as a surrogate for the broken parts of the magic rod, but for the intricacies of the technique, I relied on Nellie, who guided my hand to deftly repair it, and even then I managed to clumsily crack the anvil with my imprecise blows. It wasn't perfect, but at least the rod wasn't caked in algae and barnacles anymore. Abranus, unaware of my assistant, was stunned at how quickly I had learned, and patted me on the back with a strength that almost sent me flying before barking at me to send Fergus over here. He's been slacking off for too long now. Despite wanting to, I refrained from leaving straight after fulfilling our bargain and gracefully stayed another night as their guest. I think Fergus knew something was up by my awkwardness, but didn't press the matter, instead asking me if I'd seen anything lying around as he'd misplaced something. Changing the subject, I told him Abranus was waiting for him. Even amongst the grumpy village, Abranus was not to be left waiting. Later, the evening's festivities were somewhat sullied as Fergus became upset himself when he heard that Abranus had traded away their diamonds. But the firstborn of the triplets was undeterred, clearly still confident he, and hence the village, had the better end of the deal. Meanwhile, Clara was being moody with everyone, apparently also dismayed that Fergus had returned from his own mission, having found no one else to join their village. Could he not do anything right? I had to build another bedroom at the grumpy village that night because Fergus beat me to the guest bed. I hadn't repaired his door before he'd noticed, and now he apparently didn't realise it had been fixed. I traded some coal with him, so at least he'd have something to show his family tomorrow, and although he was wary of trading with me, accepted. I had planned to be gone at first light, but was still toiling into the morning, which gave Fergus a chance to admire the new adjoining room as I worked on it. It did strike me as odd that I seemed to be the only one around here who built anything. Abranus had told me it was fine to leave my valuables in the guest hut to lighten my pockets. I knew where I needed to go to finish my map, and its borders didn't include Lushville or Old Carlton, so I left some things here I wouldn't need. But I decided to bring the intriguing orb, and the saddle, just in case. I took in my surroundings as I walked from the grumpy village to Copperwater Cave, and also took some acacia. Overnight, I worked on refitting Copperwater Cave's atrium until I ran out of wood. I departed south, across the savannah, then up and over a ridge, collecting a stockpile of iron along the way, now starting to realise just how useful it was. Enderman finally got his own back on me when the smug cat made me lose my footing by popping up right in front of my face as I was ascending the rock. I forgot about my sore bruises when I realised I was standing on the same ridge of mountains where I had previously been lost. I couldn't find the hidey hole I thought was close by, and the perils of the night led me to tending to both the cats as well as Two-Bone. After it was Seville's turn to have some fish, she leapt to Enderman, and before I could blink, a tiny kitten was standing in front of me. He looked just like his mother. This was no place for a baby, and I was forced to retreat to the nearby Lushville. The residents of Lushville were kind and welcoming, but after the reaction Phineas had when I spent the night at Old Carlton without permission, I opted to slip away at dawn without saying hello to the locals. I was distracted from fighting the invading zombie when I saw that Enderman and the kitten were standing over some chicken meat. It was a gift for me. The kitten looked like it was feeling proud and safe to be by our sides. After finding my way back onto the borders of the map, I continued south through the forest and the jungle that lay on the other side of the ridge. I sheared the sheep I met, tried to ride a donkey, collected a mushroom and some cocoa beans, all the while satiating the resolute curiosity of the kitten who was investigating everything it saw. More presents were waiting for me when I emerged from my next hidey hole on the river opposite a lava flow. Now a family, the cats were far more affectionate to me as I escorted them. Enderman was only mildly irritated with me when I opted to swim. We spent the night on a hill where I had chopped and built against the tide of monsters. I hoped the crude hut would act as a beacon as well as a rest stop. The misfortune of locking gaze with an Enderman was mitigated somewhat by the close proximity of the new bed. Before Borg had retaliated at me, it had been a while since I had fallen, and I didn't want to start making a habit of it again. So, when the Enderman continued to hang around after I grabbed my things, I was wary. In fact, the Enderman seemed very interested in me, and imparted a vision of the strange orb I had in my possession. Their vision was cut short when it began to rain. The water seemed to burn the Enderman and it fled in pain. This was a revelation to me. I currently felt helpless if one decided to attack, but at least now I might have an ace up my sleeve. I almost travelled back towards the grumpy village underneath the ridge of mountains through a tunnel I found that was filled with stalactites and stalagmites, but with my valuables in hand, thought against it. When I did eventually get back, I had found the chest where I'd stored my things had been opened. Nothing was taken, and I wondered if Abranus was investigating my belongings again, although he had seemed to only care about weapons and armour. I didn't dwell on it, as Enderman was being particularly cuddly, which was a first for him, and I suspect that it had something to do with the safe maturation of the kitten, who had already grown into himself, albeit somewhat lean in his youth. I assisted Borg in the morning's monster clear-up, which I think might have caught Fergus's eye. The usual demeanour of the villagers had returned, and idle chatter was, thankfully, not offered. It was time to return home. The cows, Poof and Shudder, appeared very happy when I arrived. Fish was calmly swimming, apparently now accustomed with her bunkmate. I put away the things I had accrued on my travels, proudly surveyed the finished fourth map and loaded up the furnace with iron. Then hurried downstairs to grab the obsidian and proceed to finally craft the enchanting table. Unfortunately, I ran into yet one more snag. I needed a book to complete the blueprint, and Nellie wasn't about to offer herself up. With no leather available, I was once again stuck. I wanted to say this week how much I appreciate everyone's comments. You've all been so kind and it's really uplifting. Don't be afraid to comment on any particulars in the story if you have any views. I'm happy to answer questions as well, so long as it doesn't reveal any secrets. And just a bit of a heads up, I do like to keep my cards close to my chest on that front, but by all means ask away. Also, I've been going back and forth as to whether or not I will keep the webcam on during the episodes, and I think I've decided it's probably better for the story if I don't keep them on. But I will keep them on my TikTok and Instagram uploads, so if anyone particularly likes it that way, I'll link those profiles in the description. Also, apologies again to Plexaphon. His character still hasn't made an appearance, but I suspect that he will next episode, fingers crossed. So anyway, for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.